So the first shift is transparency over secrecy. So that comment about investigating in secrets and NDAs, that's a trust killer. And I don't care what many HR professionals say, most of it is not legally required. It's a habit, it's a cover your ass culture. Futurists are building processes that employees actually understand, not the conclusion, but the how. What does an investigation look like? What are my rights? And what happens after? When people understand that part of the process, even if they don't love the outcome, they're more likely to accept it as being legit. All right, the second shift is that accountability runs both directions. Now, one of the biggest complaints in these comments is that HR protects the powerful or the C suite or the organization. That someone with a higher classification wins regardless of the facts. That's the perception. Now, the futurists with their mindsets, they hold everyone equally accountable. Managers, directors, VPs, and the C suite. We understand that the moment that HR becomes a function that applies rules very selectively based on seniority, that you've lost the entire workforce. And I'm afraid what's happening is that a lot of employees are watching HR investigate maybe a frontline employee or an entry level employee and fire them within 2 weeks of the investigation. But then they watch a VP with 3 complaints against them get stuffed into a new department or worse, promoted into a new department. And if you allow that to happen, you have to understand why people just stop trusting HR. All right, shift number 3 is value that employees can actually see. So one comment asks, what does HR do that's actually beneficial? And that's a brutal question, but it is the right one. If your employees can't answer it, then you have a communication problem at minimum and an impact problem at worst. And just because employees are thinking this, I promise you, I have talked to numerous C suites about HR. They're thinking the same thing. Why am I paying so much for a department that really provides no value outside of being the policy police? And in the book, The Futurist, I actually get into how those types of HR leaders, they spend time asking different questions like, what does our workforce need in order to do their best work? Where is value created at each stage of the process within the organization? And who drives that value creation? Is it a person, a process, or a technology? And then they make decisions based off of the answers to those questions, not in reverse. And maybe this was just something that I brought over coming into HR from the line of business, but I like to look at HR as what product is it producing? So if I take that kind of a mindset, I need to be able to understand and apply that product methodology to what I'm doing. So if I'm thinking about career pathing, it's not just how do I sell this, but how do I measure the outcomes? What are the metrics? How do I measure the impact? How do I communicate this out to all of those that need to be taking advantage of this career pathing? And I think that is a very large misstep that many HR people just overlook. They put things out, they don't communicate, they don't follow up, and worse of all, especially for the C suite who's evaluating HR, they don't measure the results and they don't measure it to key business outcomes. So the futurists make sure that their work is real, that it is communicated, and that people know that it exists and how it is driving enterprise value. All right, shift number 4 is HR is the voice of the workforce inside of the leadership team. This was something that I was incredibly passionate about whenever I was in HR leadership. I really stood by my job as being the employee advocate and the voice of the employee. Sometimes that was silencing a room of leaders, asking a question that none of them had the answer to. And the comments about HR being anti worker are often based on reality because HR is absent from the strategy discussions. Oftentimes, a decision is made by leadership and it's passed off to HR to execute, especially whenever it comes to notifying and managing the impacted employees. Now, futurist HR leaders, they're in the room when decisions get made, and they're asking some really tough questions. And they're bringing workforce data, engagement, retention, performance, forecast and models, skill gap analysis, all of that. They're bringing all of that to the table for the leaders so that way they have data to be able to make an informed decision. Now, notice, they're not a messenger. They're actually a key stakeholder. All right, I'm not going to wrap this up with some motivational line about how great HR is or how we're on the cusp of completely changing the industry because I wanted this video to challenge every HR leader to really stop and think, how do you earn trust back from the employees? One interaction at a time. So if you're an HR professional watching this, that starts with you reading those comments and not asking, how do I respond to this? But where did my team give someone that impression? Or more reflective, what have I done to cause those type of comments? Because I promise you, if comments like these are showing up on a video about HR, those experiences are showing up in your organization too, and all of your employees are talking about it. Now, let me talk to the employees who've been burned by HR, and I know many of you have. I had too before I got into it. I want you to know that this system that you experienced is not the only version that is possible. I know this because I have run good HR organizations who valued the employee and stood up for the employee, as well as honoring their fiduciary responsibility to the organization. It can be done. It's a delicate balance, but it can be done. And I want you to know that there are HR leaders out there, the futurists, who are actually building something different. They actually believe that when people are treated well, companies perform better. And they have the data to prove it. So if you like what you heard on this video, make sure that you like, subscribe, and share it. And if you're an employee, I dare you to share it with your HR.